Welcome, everyone, to another episode of HundrED Connected. I'll be your host today. I'm Lindsay Stewart, and I'm calling in from New Hampshire in the US. And also on the call is the incredible Hanneke Maki from BuzzKids in South Africa.
Hello.
And Alex Shapiro, the one and only from HundrED itself, from Helsinki, Finland.
Oh, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
It's great that you covered all those. And actually, we're dearly missing Anetta and Sherelle today because of the time zone. But I will say it's a great opportunity for us to move around the globe a bit and meet someone from New Zealand. So we're really, really thrilled to talk today to Komodo Wellbeing, an evidence-based software solution. Integrating well-being, measurement, mental health initiatives, and social emotional learning, something near and dear to my heart, and mindfulness practices. And of course, they all go into the schools because we're all here to allow kids to flourish. And this innovation allows for custom-built surveys, check-in systems, analytics, and it's all to empower students. And what I love about it is that it's proactive, not reactive. I'm really, really delighted to hear the story behind Komodo Wellbeing and to welcome our special guest today. But I'm going to keep you in suspense for a minute longer of who that is and ask from humility and curiosity, Chris. I've already spoiled the surprise, but I wanted to actually try, because I just learned about a traditional Maori greeting, and you can let me know if it's incorrect, but it was so lovely to learn about this. And it was in the conference that I'm in today. So it was sort of like everything, all the stars aligned. And when we were introduced today, we were asked to consider the mountain that you're closest to, the water you're closest to, what brings you here today, your family name, and your first name. So please tell me if I got that introduction accurate and take it away.
Yeah, so kia ora and hello. So I'm Chris, the CEO and co-founder at Komodo Wellbeing. And just to say, absolutely nailed it. From my understanding, I think it's called a mihi. So that's typically what it's called in terms of talking around your story and how you got here. So yes, very much on point. And I like to always address, because I know when people go, you're from New Zealand, but your accent does not sound like that. So I very fortunately now 9 years ago moved from the UK out to New Zealand. So I'm based in the beautiful garden city of Christchurch down in the South Island. So it's definitely been a exciting journey, a very different one to what I originally planned.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's really great to have a bit of context about where you're calling in from today. I also want to make sure that we mention here your co-creator, Jack Wood, who couldn't be with us today. Clearly, the two of you have committed your careers to developing well-being and pastoral care and helping schools identify how they can best support students with their well-being. And we're really excited to hear more about your story. So I want to welcome officially Chris Bacon to HundrED Connected. The big thing I know I'm most interested to start off with, Chris, is your why. But also as a researcher, I actually am very passionate about well-being itself. And I know there's many definitions out there. So I thought it would be really good to ground the conversation in your definition of well-being and give us a little bit of your why.
Yeah. So in terms of my why, it's something I've tried to work on in defining, because it is quite a hard thing. And it's not something we typically focus on. What I've realized throughout my entire life is my why has always been about empowering others to thrive. And what I've realized is I've only learned this probably in the last few years of the connection of how I've done that. So my journey to where I am today with Komodo and what we've founded is not linear, as most of us expect and what we presume it would be. And I think, from my perspective, empowering others to thrive gives me the energy to help, ultimately what we want to try and achieve here at Komodo on a regular basis, empowering those others. And sorry, just with the other part of the question.
Yeah, the other part was your definition of well-being.
Yeah, I think the definition of well-being is quite an interesting one. In all honesty, I personally struggle to define it because I think it is very personal to each individual. But from my perspective, I think it's a sense of quality of life, a sense of balance, a sense of resilience, and a range of different characteristics. So I try to not personally say, hey, everyone should use my own definition of it. As I say, if I use my own version of it, I would say it's around having a sense of balance and understanding of quality of life. And that's definitely something I've realized moving to New Zealand, which back in the UK and throughout my life, I truly didn't really appreciate until I got out here and Yeah, actually got connected with the world and connected with nature in particular.
So it's amazing getting to know you a little bit and more about Komodo. And I'm really interested in its backstory and also about your partner, Jack. How did it come about? How did you guys find one another? And then also to share with us potentially about this interesting name, Komodo.
Yes, well, let's start with the name because I think that's always the question I get asked when I'm traveling the world and meeting with schools. I think it's a fascinating one that I really personally enjoy. So, where Komodo comes from is it does relate to the Komodo dragon, and really why we picked that in particular is the Komodo dragon is a part of a family of lizards known as the monitor lizards, and they're seen as the apex predator or the very best at monitoring. Being a monitor lizard, which is exactly what we want to be, is the very best in terms of monitoring, and so that's where it comes from. Also, probably another interesting part is that typically in the well-being space, there's a lot of stereotypical names around it. And what we recognize is if we can make it a really cool, fun experience, something that kids want to say, Komodo, I want to do my Komodo, it really destigmatizes the areas around mental health and well-being. And like just to share a really quick story on that. I was in Dubai recently meeting a school and I walked out from the car. So we parked up and there was a number of primary school kids. And as soon as I walked out, I had my Komodo shirt on, which I did today. And these kids went, oh, you're from Komodo. We love Komodo. And it was just like the most uplifting feeling of that ultimately for them, Komodo is this centralized way of sharing their voice and their well-being, which is, their definition, I suppose, of that well-being space. But for me, it's quite a proud moment to see that Komodo is recognized and centered in that way in their minds of Komodo is a really important part of our lives.
The Komodo dragon is a monitor lizard. How does it monitor? Just tell us a little bit more about the Komodo dragon. All I know about the Komodo dragon is what my 5-year-old tells me, and what I see is just a really like slubbery thing. So tell us a bit more about how Komodo dragon monitors.
That's all you need to know. Everything you need your 5-year-olds can offer.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, they're obviously known as quite I suppose, isolated and solitary animals that go on their own, monitor their surroundings to be able to identify those and stalking their prey in a roundabout
Okay.
way. But from our perspective, what I think we also want to do is choose something that represents the very best, but also something that is, quite universal in terms of language that kids can pick up on. Like we're doing Komodo today. Now, there's a very interesting
Yeah.
part here of what we're trying to do is destigmatize everything around well-being and mental health. It is a really tough topic, and so it's about trying to make it fun,
Yeah.
engaging, and nothing beats a dragon these days, right?
No, of course. I mean, it's very important. I think naming can make or break a thing. So that's awesome. So tell us about Jack and the backstory a bit.
Where everything began with Komodo is my journey a little bit. So it has, as I said at the beginning, it's not very linear. So I actually thought originally I was going to be working in a professional football club. I was a very classic Brit of I have this dream of working in a professional football club, and I actually achieved that dream very early on in my life, which I was incredibly fortunate to have. During my undergrad and masters back in the UK, I was focused on sports science, and I was working in Norwich City Football Club for a number of years. And what started to intrigue me and led me down this pathway was this angle around research and, in particular, of using data to predict and prevent injuries. So, all the different data sources, can we use that data to prevent injuries? And what's really interesting is there's a range of different data sources that athletes and sports clubs will use. So that led me to moving to New Zealand to pursue a PhD was my original plan, which is what I told my family, my friends of, hey, I'm moving to the other side of the world because I want to do a PhD. And I wanted to focus on this area around predicting and preventing injuries using data. So very different to what Komodo does today. And so Komodo's origins comes from that. It comes from an evidence-based layer, comes from research, and it actually comes from one fundamental principle, which I believe, which is lots of research goes into a beautiful binder that sits on a shelf and collects dust and is never used and never brought to real world. I never have had that in me. I've always wanted to make sure it's something that was practical and something that can actually be used in the real world and have the impact that I wanted to ultimately deliver and feeding back to my why. Komodo's first life, as such, is we had an athlete monitoring platform. And so we orientated around youth athletes because what we've found and research suggests is that 60% of all injuries are caused because of re-injury. And so the concept is, well, how do we become proactive instead of reactive? How do we prevent at the beginning? And so that's where Komodo's journey began. What we realized was we were working with a lot of schools in particular, and my co-founder was at the University of Canterbury with me, and he was basically intrigued like myself of how can we deliver this impact in the world? How can we go above and beyond? We both had an interest in terms of using data and using it in a smart, intelligent way. And at the same time, we were working with a number of schools who were telling us exactly the same thing, but in a very different context. What they were basically sharing was in the school environment, it's very hard to get that student voice or staff voice around well-being. And there's a number of different things that can prevent that, let alone things like stigma or who do we talk to, when do we speak to them, what do we say. And what Komodo, the original platform, was actually providing was a way for them to track well-being. And that was one of the components of the platform. From this, it allowed us to really pinpoint and pivot into what we do today. We started pivoting end of 2019, so before pandemic and COVID and all of those days, which are now thankfully many years behind us. And so from mid 2020, we pivoted into the school wellbeing space. Very different journey to what we presumed we were laying out for ourselves. But actually, what we're solving right now is a truly mission critical problem that makes the world of difference for a number of students and staff globally.
Beautiful. But tell us about the products and the solutions that are currently available and how it actually, as a product today, lives in the real world for a school anywhere in the world to kind of come to you and use your product. What just as a sort of high level, what can you do to support that school in terms of your products and services?
Definitely. Maybe how I frame this is just laying out that problem statement because I think that's really important for any way that we try to solve and support educators and schools is understanding the pain points they feel. And one of those I've already mentioned is around providing that voice. It is an incredibly tough piece for someone to open up, regardless if we're an adult, regardless if we're in school or not in school. So I think that's a really important layer to this. Secondly, is actually having tangible data and evidence to suggest what is going on or what is not going on. We all have that gut instinct. The interesting part is in a school environment, it is to a multitude of layers because there's a number of students, a number of factors going on. So it's actually quite hard to consistently try to get ahead of that. And that's probably the third layer of this is that at the moment, schools, and to their credit, they try really hard to be reactive to what they can see. And so what that means is we're not able to be as proactive as we'd like to be, aka preventative. So by framing it that way, what I want to really, I suppose, stress here is what Komodo really provides is a school wellbeing solution that embraces these challenges. We focus very much on giving schools that visibility across whether that be an individual student, the classroom, the year level, the school as a whole. And the way that's done is we're able to adapt the platform based on the school's requirements, cultural sensitivities. We do work with schools in 26 countries, I think it is today. So there's a lot of variation there that we have to adapt for. So simply put, it's customizable and flexible wellbeing surveys where the students and staff can complete that reflection comes into Komodo. We're able to automatically and intelligently flag any issues proactively before they're actually a really big compounded incident, which gives really precise feedback of these are the issues, and here is the opportunity to have that conversation effectively and early on to then also allow them to record that intervention and see those trends over time of actually what we're seeing is our year nines are struggling with sleep issues, not what we presumed, which was digital well-being issues. I use those two examples because sleep and digital well-being are the most common issues in every school globally. So very much Komodo is about giving schools that autonomy as well around well-being so they have the evidence, they have the data to make the proactive interventions, the proactive impact, and more importantly is demonstrate that they have true voice across students and staff.
Really a relevant product in the world today. It brought up this very big world explosive Netflix special that has just come out, Adolescence. Have you seen it? On
Yes,
Netflix
yeah.
now, based in the UK. You should all watch it. And how you just describe what your solution could do, it almost feels like if that school, that community, which is obviously just a fictional one, could have had something like that. It's very powerful for me as a parent to listen to you speak that way. I'm like, if that was there, maybe they could have been caught. And
Mm.
this is such an interesting time for issues like this. It's a beautiful film, a beautiful 4-part series on Netflix, internationally available. Everyone should watch it. Adolescence. I won't say more.
Just to add to that, I think that's I think it's a really important point, right? Is providing voice is not just about, oh, it has to go to the counselor, it has to go to the dedicated pastoral staff. The reality is with voice, whether you're a student or staff that needs to talk about it, it's who you trust. And I think that's a really important layer to this is that we have to create opportunities for those conversations to happen. And it's with the individual that I have that personal relationship and trust around, right? That's where it begins. And if we can't, what we can't just rely on is, okay, well, I've got a counselor in my school, they're going to solve my problems. Well, actually, the student will, more times than not, wants the conversation with the teacher in the classroom, or it could be another trusted adult in their life. And it's about creating those opportunities in a really organic way and without feeling pressured around it as well.
I'd love to pick up on a couple of threads that both of you were just talking about here, and something that's been percolating in my mind a little bit. So I'm originally from the United States, and there's a lot of conversation about mental health crises, and it's often also, just as Hanneke was talking about in this Netflix special, geared towards boys, right? There's a loneliness crisis for boys in particular. Boys are being left behind in a lot of ways. They're underperforming their female counterparts in school. They have fewer social connections. And one of the things that has really stuck out to me as you've been describing Komodo, you are coming at this from an angle that we don't often see in a lot of the well-being innovations that we are so excited about here at HundrED, which is coming already from a more male-coded point of view. Starting from the sports already, starting with the name. I mean, as a kid, I loved Komodo dragons. Like all of the facts that I didn't spout out because I don't want your 5-year-old to call me out on them, Hanneke. Like I think it's really interesting. And so I know that already you are taking these proactive approaches, but I wonder if you have any thoughts as somebody who's been involved in coaching, who's been involved in these kind of more boy-dominated areas. Often sports are some of the only places where boys are able to really talk to other people. What are some of those lessons that you might have brought into Komodo as you built it now and made it something that's really built to serve everybody and built to bring communities together and build these spaces for communication?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And it's something, again, I'm going to probably use the data that we've had at Komodo around this. So I would believe going into sort of the answer to that question, my assumptions would be, the boys aren't going to engage with this as much. They're not going to open up. We're going to see more from females. Interesting enough, we see a very different relationship to what we presume. So with Komodo, what we've typically seen is that with females, when they start using Komodo, the pattern is that early on, they're still trying to build up the trust with the system. Are staff actually going to respond? If I share a little bit, are they actually going to initially respond to that? When that trust is built over time, they then get to a point of effectively oversharing, which is actually just as good as undersharing. Because if we get something, even a sliver, it gives us an opportunity. And then when we get to this oversharing stage, it gives us even more opportunity to understand and divulge into what is the challenges being faced. From a male perspective, it's actually very different. So what we typically see is that actually from the beginning, especially young males, are very open to sharing through the platform. And it's actually quite plateaued. And the reason being, when we've started to dig into this a bit more, is because number one, it's confidential. Number two, it's not in front of my peers. And number three is I don't feel like I'm going to have a number and my friends or someone else jumping in saying, I can see that you've got this problem. Or I can see that's a challenge. Or, and that kind of almost ridicule, which is quite unfortunate that we do see that. So I think to a certain extent, what we've also done is lean into technology. The reality is, unfortunately, I mean, we're doing this today, right? We're connecting via different mediums in terms of the internet, different apps. You know, we have to lean into the interface, the user engagement that we see on a regular basis. And especially with kids, let alone with boys, especially, is that they actually regularly will use these platforms to communicate. And Komodo is now another layer to that. So I think that's number one. The only other thing I would add into that is giving them that regular opportunity to reflect. And this is something actually I reflect upon that I'm actually pretty poor at. So I'm always an individual that goes, what's next? What can I do to further Komodo? How else can we be providing further solutions? But I very I very much struggle to look back and go, actually, that was a really positive time. That went really well. So giving that regularity, creating that habit gives, especially, I think not only just for males, but for all of us, an opportunity to look back and go, oh, actually, you know what? That was a struggle, and I do want to have a conversation about that. Or that was really positive. I can take that forward going into my next week or into exams or whatever pressures come about with school. So yeah, it's been quite interesting to see that over time.
Yeah, of course. And as we all know, well-being isn't just for any one group of people, right? It should be something that we're delivering to everybody. And it's very interesting to hear about those differences in how populations are approaching it.
I'm curious about, have you come across the work of Dan Siegel, this is resilience work and it's mental health and mindfulness, all the things you're talking about, and hearing you talk about reflection. He often says resilience is built through reflection and relationship building. And I love that. And I love to work out of that place. And as you talk about the relationship piece, can you help us understand how you connect then? Like, I can see now the reflection, I can see the pieces and a bit more of the process, but then how do you connect them out of the platform to connect and have a conversation potentially, or to deepen a relationship with someone in their lives?
Yeah, and I think a
Is that a
really
part
key
of it,
part.
or am I just hoping that, yeah?
No, no, no. It's fundamental. And I think actually what we have to do at Komodo is foster independence. And that's what we're actually doing here for schools, for staff members and students. Software can't replace a human to human conversation. That's my personal opinion. Totally understand the use cases around chatbots and AI mental health tools. I really see a space, and at the same time, I don't think it replaces that in-person connectivity. And what we're fundamentally solving, Komodo, to build on what you've said there, is it's back to those relationships from a human layer. Really, what Komodo's about is fostering the independence of the school to be able to have these conversations, devise the interventions that make sense for their community, their environment. So just to use an example, where we're able to provide a list of check-ins for staff members of students that should be prioritized with a specific area or conversation starter to have with them. And they don't have to be a psychologist, a counselor. They don't have to be someone trained. It could be anyone can have that conversation. And we very much do it in that tangible, actionable way. So I can see student A is struggling with sleep. I'm going to explore and have that conversation. Hey, student A, I can see that the last week, it looks like sleep has dropped off. What has been causing that? And having that genuine curiosity and care suddenly opens a door to a student saying, yeah, I've not been sleeping well because I've been worrying about this exam, or this has happened online, or this has happened at home. And more times than not, what actually Komodo does is it brings to the surface I suppose, the classic tip of the iceberg of what truly is going on, to open the door to realizing actually what we're seeing is a far bigger issue. And we're so grateful and thank you for sharing that, as we can now help you now versus letting that compound and become a more worse situation.
I really love that. It feels as if you're using tech to bring people closer together. That's my favorite way of using tech, as opposed to ed tech for tech's sake. Tech, 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 tech. And tech is, of course, wonderful and important, especially in the higher grades. I work with children from birth to 13 in my work, so up until the end of primary school in our South African context. And I just recently heard a professor say in a global stage that ed tech in its classic form is a failed experience, and that by just putting tech in for tech's sake to replace humans and to try to keep up with international development, technological development, it has actually harmed children. I wouldn't go as far as to say that. I think there's so many nuances and so many solutions. But personally, my preference is also like, seems as though, and tell me if I'm right or wrong here, but it seems as though using the tech very specifically to help understand and diagnose the problem, and then sort of guide for human connection to take place, which is really, really wonderful.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it actually comes back to one of the first questions we discussed. It's about why. And if we don't connect back to the why of what we're trying to do here, I agree, you're fundamentally failing the core pain point you're trying to solve. One of the big things I've always stressed at Komodo, and we actively do, is we're not a here's the software or here's the data, see you later scenario. I think that would be totally unfair for us to do that for a school and for any organization. We have to play a role in supporting them. We're not going to solve the problem in regards to going into the school and now having those conversations. What we have to do is, again, coming back to that fostering independence of understanding the challenges, giving them, we have insights globally across all of our schools that we can share. We can also connect schools with other schools globally that all have the same problems. That's what we have. It comes back to that why. I agree in terms of EdTech today. It's a bit of a bugbear of mine. I go, no one wants to use a
Mine too.
clunky platform. No one wants to use something that doesn't work or doesn't actually help me with what I want to
Yeah.
achieve. You have to, right?
Well, just tech for the sake of tech, and I get why it's gone so fast and it's moved so fast, because education is falling behind in terms of development and the rate of change in the world. But the thing that will prepare our children for the future and give them a fighting chance in a future we cannot begin to imagine that's going to have new problems and new solutions. It's going to be their human skill. It's going to be the part that makes them able to still operate as humans. That's my prediction, is the ability to still collaborate, to listen, to have empathy, curiosity, these things that is going to make us different from the zombie apocalypse. And I really love that. I'm curious then, so if you went to school and you worked and you did surveys and you were able to kind of reflect, it's this beautiful mirror you're putting up for them to say, this is what's going on in your community. Is there any recommendations that you then do to say, in terms of these problems, we've seen that schools have brought in yoga or meditative practice or, not to put words in your mouth, but like kung fu has really helped with this kind of stress. Again, helping us to come back into our bodies then, right, with the solution, to not just again do another cerebral solution neck up to the problem, but for a sports guy like yourself, does the solution get back into the bones and into the body? Because I feel like that connection, mind, body, spirit, is also something that we have to keep reminding ourselves as the tech whizzes past us, that we've got to get back into that full embodied experience, especially with the little kids for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's a couple of ways we do that. Number one is that every school has what we call a school success lead. And so they're orientated around one core goal is making sure schools are actually understanding the data, getting success from the data we are providing them. And to your point, is actually running interventions that are relevant to their environment. We work with schools in many different countries and there's different challenges and things we have to consider. A good example, it's just been Ramadan across the Middle East. So our Middle Eastern schools deal with very different wellbeing interventions during that time frame, where it's a shortened day in comparison to, let's say, in New Zealand, where we've started our school year, we're into term one, we're about to lose summer and go into winter, and which is typically a time when we struggle in regards to well-being and having a positive emotion, physiologically and psychologically. So we do that in terms of having regular reviews with the school to help them understand their data. And also what we do have in Komodo is we have our own psychology team. So we had a head of psychology who's a child and family psychologist who helps us in terms of developing really appropriate resources, really evidence-backed resources, and not just any old thing that you can find off the internet. We're really strong on making sure it's rigorous. It is very easy, I admit, to go onto the internet and find articles and find resources. Let's take a topic such as sleep. And there's a difference between that and finding something that's appropriate for the school setting, for the age groups, culturally as well. So we really try to blend in that evidence-backed, that psychological layer to ensure what we are delivering to schools actually is based in science. Coming back to where I've originally come from, that's where science and research truly makes a difference. When it's actually fundamentally used, it's not sitting on that shelf. It is actually being used in the real world, making an impact on a daily basis.
Okay, I'm hopping in because I've got so many questions. Always. Chris, first question is, what is it that you do to enhance your own well-being?
It's a great question. And
Especially around the story. I can hear it's in there. I want to hear yours. And then I want to hear a story that's changed someone's life. Because I know that that's happened through Komodo.
Yes, definitely. So for my own well-being, I actually come back to sport. That is my go-to. And I enjoy all types of sport. Honestly, I know I'm a football fan. I'm an Ipswich Town fan. I mean, at the start of the season, I was ecstatic. We're in the Premier League for the first time in 22 years. A little bit different now, but that's a different story. Sport is definitely my go-to, whether that be playing golf, whether that be playing darts, whether that be going out and watching sport and being part of that buzz. And actually, what I realized again is connecting with others is always the team sports that help me personally. So that's probably my number one. The only other thing I do in regards to my well-being, and it's something that I'm trying to get better at, and this is very nostalgic and very British. I realize what I'm about to say. I listen to podcasts, but I don't listen to your traditional podcasts. So I listen to a football phone-in podcast, 606, which it seems really weird. It's like, why are you listening to that? And actually, it's this connection back to the UK, back to home, listening to people talking about their sports teams and how passionate they are. And the reason I actually do that is, number one, is connection back to home and reminding me of some of those good times to reflect back. But actually, number two is to hear how individuals try to articulate their feelings and emotions. I think that's always quite fast. It's that classic feeling of people watching, but I suppose in this case is people listening. Of I'm saying, oh, it's interesting how they've put that point together. Have they actually consolidated that? So that's how I do my well-being. In regards to some of the stories, I suppose I can share. There is some quite harrowing but beautiful stories that I know I have to be cautious of sharing. The one that really sticks with me is a very early story at Komodo, and it's probably the one that stuck with me the most. When we first launched Komodo, we had a school and they deployed Komodo, and within the first week, they had a child come up to them via the Komodo survey. And basically, this child unfortunately struggled with a stutter, and that, with I suppose his peers was a bit of a target for bullying, unfortunately. And so when the student used the Komodo platform to say, look, this is happening, it's actually getting a bit worse, the first question, or firstly, the teachers were like, firstly, thank you for sharing. That is fantastic. And then it was this sort of curious understanding of, how come you didn't share this beforehand? What was stopping you? And really, what was interesting was the student basically responded by saying, actually, it's just because of the way the school was orientated. Where I would go to report my issues and talk about them was this pastoral safeguarding room, was in the canteen. So if I walked up to you, everyone will know that I've got an issue, I'm a problem, or I'm tattling on my friends as such, when actually it's a really serious issue. And the reason I like to highlight that story is, typically I think we think about well-being as barriers of, I don't know what to say or who to say it to. Actually, it's sometimes the unseen barriers that stop us from talking about it. And I really feel for that child where effectively they were for weeks on end not feeling confident enough to approach that room because of the setting and the environment. That school was then very quickly able to make a realistic change and go, let's move that room to somewhere where it won't be seen, and we can provide that, individuals with a layer of anonymity and confidentiality to open up. So just an example that always sticks with me. I go, I would not have realized that, and that's absolutely valid that I would not have realized that as well.
Yeah, it's wonderful to share those. You're opening doors, and that is such an important part for student voice and student well-being. So that's wonderful to hear that. The other thing I love, because I actually just left a session where we were presenting our research, and one of the findings of self-care practice for practitioners, educators, was exactly what you're saying, is the connection and the support. And obviously that's what we're trying to do here as well through the podcast, is just continue this conversation, that we're all here supporting one another, doing this work together. So I love that you highlighted that. Thank you.
I have a question that you might not have an answer for, and please tell me if you don't, but I'm certain you do. So you have alluded to a couple of times how successful Komodo has been at spreading around the world. And you're also somebody who, similarly to Lindsay and myself, are also expats. We're transplants. We're living in new places. And I know that when I came to Finland, I have found a lot of well-being developed through knitting, through solitude, and through nature, things that I were never very comfortable with before. I wonder if, when you have been doing this work of translating Komodo into these new settings, have you discovered anything for well-being that has helped inform what you do now, your own ideas?
Oh, good question. And are you referring to within Komodo, the company? Is that what you're thinking about, or just more broadly?
I mean, it's always more interesting if it's yours, but if it's Komodo too, that's fine.
Well, the reason I think about Komodo is, I think one of the key things we have to do is practice what we preach, which again is quite confronting. These are topics when we're talking about and being open and honest and talking about those challenges. I think we have to live and breathe. And would I say we do it brilliantly? Uh, I don't think anyone does it brilliantly, and that's not a to be horrible to anyone, because I think it's something we always have to consistently work on, to be genuine and to be open-minded and have those conversations. So, like, for us at Komodo, we're regularly giving our staff an opportunity to voice what's going on their minds. What are they talking about? What are the challenges that we can do? I am inadvertently highly ambitious. My vision of where Komodo can be is in every school on this planet, and I'm working towards that every single day. And whether I achieve that or not is a different story, but that's what I'm working towards, and I have to focus on. I suppose why I bring that up and talk about Komodo is I think we ensure we bring people that meet our values, what we're trying to, I suppose, to a certain extent, bring as a vision for our schools and deliver as a bit of philosophy of the way we see education changing. So we do focus very heavily on the staff meeting those values and for us to implement that in our own ways. On a personal level, I think the number one thing I have done is use gratitude. And I think gratitude is such an underused layer of well-being. It's very easy and very typical. If I have my exam results back, what's the first thing I do? Do I look at the answers I got right, or do I look at the answers I got wrong? It's a very classic mindset of we just go, oh, I got these 3 questions wrong. But hold on a minute, you got all the other 97 right. Is that not good? And also, I suppose I use that as an example because gratitude comes in and saying, hey, do you know what? Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being honest with me, whether that be in Komodo or in my own personal life. Gratitude is such a powerful tool to reinforce behavior. And sometimes what I see is that it's something that is lacked because we're actually not sure how to say thank you, which is quite weird in a way. And actually, as I said, like my example I shared earlier of the student opening up, one of the first things the teachers did was they said, thank you for sharing. It's as simple as that. We don't have to go to instant problem solving. We don't have to go to here's the exact evidence and the route we need to take. Just a simple acknowledgement of gratitude and thank you goes an entirely long way towards validation, which is actually it's probably the last part is I really try to make sure I validate others, even if I disagree with the opinion. I have to accept that sometimes opinions will be wrong. And I have to validate and listen and have that gratitude that someone is willing to share that with me. So yeah, it's probably the things I've taken forward of in Komodo and then in personal life as well.
Well, let me just say thank you.
You're on live, like people are listening. You
Yeah.
get the last question. What do you want to make sure all our listeners know?
Well, apart from obviously Komodo is the best platform, and that's all you need to care about, which is a side point, right? Well, I think actually where I come back to is, and there's a principle that I've heard from someone else. So I'm going to talk on someone else's behalf of something that's been shared with me. And it comes back to everything that we talk about gratitude and kind of that what comes around goes around attitude. So one of the things I now live by is this value of you've got to create enough surface area for luck to strike. And it's a value that really sticks with me because I go, if you want to make a difference in the world, if you want to have that ripple effect, you've got to do the work. You've got to have that impact. You've got to create, you maybe have a range of different conversations that you can't directly in that precise moment see the impact it delivers. In a long, indirect way is where you can see that change. And I suppose I reflect on that because I go, for people listening today, that's something I would love everyone to take away is go, what am I doing to create that surface area for luck to strike? And because that can be applied in any context. I could be in a school where I'm going to have that conversation with that child who looks like they are struggling, or I've seen a data point somewhere that says something has changed. Have that conversation, create that surface area for luck to strike to actually support that child. Go and support a staff member on a project where they are very much overwhelmed and you're hearing those cues. Have that opportunity, take that. And then from a school's perspective is look at this and go, right, what are we doing? It's okay if we haven't done an area perfectly yet. Are we creating the opportunity for ourselves to further, to take another step in terms of the duty of care we deliver? Well-being and pastoral care is no longer just a tick box. It is a core priority. We don't just want students coming out who are academic machines but can't cope in the real world. Are we actually doing that? And it's really healthy to sit back and go, we're not doing that to the best of our abilities. So now is that opportunity to create that surface area, create that opportunity for it to luck to strike and actually impact that environment. So yes, I think that's a really core thing that sits with me. What are you doing to impact and create that ripple effect?
Such another really cool slogan to keep with us and put in our hearts, like creating enough surface area for luck to strike. I love that one as well. Just as a closing question we ask all of our beautiful guests that we get to share this hour with is for you to just describe to us your idea of your dream for education at large. Share that with us, and we'll put that together in our dream box as we continue to chat to more people like yourself.
Yes, I have actually thought about this quite a lot. I normally think about this from a direct Komodo context, but I'm going to try and remove that for now. What I believe is happening is since COVID, there has been tailwinds to shift away that education is not just a bit of I suppose, a conveyor belt of we're focused on academic results. And what I believe is fundamentally changed and shifting even more globally is that pastoral care, safeguarding, mental health, everything around that layer is becoming just as important in deciding which school I will send my kids to versus which school is going to help in regards to academics. Personally, I don't have kids as of yet, but in the future, what I know when I'm looking at school, I want to be looking at a school that on their website, or even if you sit in their reception, you know that is a core fundamental piece of the fabric of that school. I don't want a school that just purely gets my student to be an A stars. I know that's not going to help them in the long run. I want them to make sure they have that high duty of care, and that is a core layer on their website of, typically you see on most school websites, oh, we've got this many A-star students, this many students that have gone to universities. What I'd love to see on there is another layer of this is our well-being score. This is what we have done. Look at the issues we have handled. This is how we are owning up and challenging those challenges. I think that's the way I see the world and education changing, is that a school becomes a holistic place where all of these are evenly mapped and evenly accounted for, not just focusing on academics. And from a Komodo perspective, just to share on that side, what I hope to see is Komodo will become this core wellbeing management system. And when I go onto a school's website, they are saying, we use Komodo proudly because it encompasses our entire wellbeing system, our wellbeing approach. And then for me, what I have a personal ambition around is that someone chooses to send their kids to a school because they have Komodo. That's what I'm working towards. And if we can achieve that, I know I've done my life's work.
So inspiring.
I know you know the research that if the well-being's in place, the academics are through the roof. So can we change that
Yeah.
conversation? I mean, many of us are in that conversation at HundrED. We know that. We've experienced it. There's the research.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you speaking out of that place.
And I can echo what you said. Like my son is about to go to grade 1. I mean, the last thing I'm almost interested in is academics because
I think we have to stop that conversation too, though, Hannah, because that's just it, is that if you have that foundation and you have that holistic approach, you don't have to worry about academics.
exactly.
Because you can't get there without all the well-being that Chris is talking
Yeah.
about, all that
Yep.
attention.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But with him, because he's been in this nursery school that has been so nurturing, and he comes back covered in mud and noodles in his hair, and he's having the sensory and the beautiful experience. He's 5. All I care about is where else am I going to get the noodles in the hair and the mud in his face and the paint stripe across his clothes. I could not care less. I'm looking for a place where he's going to play as long as possible. I'm looking for a place where he's going to be nurtured. I'm looking for a place where alternative things like arts and things are on the map. I'm looking for a place where my son is going to be emotionally whole. So exactly what you're speaking about. And it's a difficult thing. So I'm
Yeah.
exactly, as a parent, also hearing that and saying that's exactly it.
Yeah. And I want to say to parents who, I love hearing your perspective because your son's 5, Hanukkah, right now.
Yeah.
There's going to be a day. There's going to be a day where that curiosity moves to anxiety. And I'm going to invite every parent in that moment to say, hey, let me stay curious about this moment again and look at my child through the child's whole development, because that's the critical piece, because we can do it when they're young, but when they get older and older, that's when the anxiety rises. And that's the thing that then transfers to the child and et cetera, et cetera. So
But it comes
just
back to those future skills as well.
Chris Bacon from Komodo Wellbeing in New Zealand. We couldn't have been more thrilled to have this hour with you, this time with you. And thank you so very much for everything you're doing to improve well-being and students' lives and families. So really, congratulations and thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you. And thank you to yourselves. I just thought I'd like to say that this is really important for us in this space. We're all working towards the exact same goal. So thank you for sharing this and bringing educators, different innovators and layers to this, right? It's a multifaceted problem. So just to yourselves, thank you for actually putting this together. It's so important that we share positive messages of change and innovation. So yeah, thank you again.
Do you have an education innovation you want to share with the world? The call for the 2026 Global Collection is now open. Apply at HundrED.org.